Hey, welcome back to NewZeroland. We've had our Energicas for about 6 months now, so it's time to modify them. Before our next track day, I wanted to make sure our bikes were protected, just in case we have an accident, because I don't think my insurance company wants to finance our racing careers. So I got a bunch of aftermarket parts from Rob over at Energica of New England. He sells a whole bunch of cool stuff on his website, so go check out the link below. And they made chapters for each of these parts, so feel free to skip around to whatever part you're installing. None of these came with instructions, so I decided to make my own. Let's start with the axle sliders. Whether or not these will actually do anything in a crash is up for debate, but I feel like it's one of those situations where it can't hurt to have more protection even if you'll never need it. And they look pretty cool. On the front wheel you have two different shapes, and it'll be obvious which one goes where. Pull the pin out and take the cap off, and you'll see an Allen bolt in the middle. When you loosen that bolt, these pieces can shift together, and when you tighten it, they push apart. This is how they don't fall out. Then you can put the axle slider in, tighten up the Allen bolt, then put the cap back on, drop in the pin, and you're good to go. One side done. On the other side, you want to loosen the pinch bolts at the bottom of the fork, because you have to take the axle nut out. So you want to get a huge 30mm socket and remove the axle nut. It isn't too tight, and you don't have to raise the bike to do this. This axle slider actually replaces the factory axle nut. Put some grease on the threads of the new nut and screw it in. Then get a torque wrench with a 19mm socket and torque it to 60 Nm or 44 foot-pounds. Cap it, put the pin in, then torque those pinch bolts to 15 Nm or 11 foot-pounds. The right rear slider slides right in. And it's the same deal as before. Tighten up the bolt, cap it, pin it, and you're done. And if you were wondering if the axle sliders will clear the spools, they do. On the other side, you'll want to use this one. It has a thick spacer part so it sits further out to clear the swing arm. Tighten the bolt, put the cap on, pin it, and you're done. The final result looks nice and should save all these parts from being damaged in a crash. Your wheels, brakes, and that swing arm are really expensive, so these sliders are worth it. But the better investment, in my opinion, is frame sliders. This design is pretty genius, but it's tricky to install, so let me explain. You put the big bolt through the shaft, and there's a nut that goes on the end of it. Then you stick the shaft into the mushroom tip and screw it until it's tight. The frame slider mounts here to this point on the frame, which is awesome because you don't have to cut anything for them to fit. I never understood cutting your fairing to protect your fairing. It kind of defeats the purpose, right? Anyway, this side body piece has to come off. It's held on by two 3mm Allen bolts and a 5mm Allen where the turn signal is. And this could be a good time to swap in Rob's crazy bright LED turn signals, which you can also find on his website. Anyway, now there's this bracket you have to take off. Two more Allen bolts. The little one on the left is easy, but the right one was bigger and it might require some assistance. That hole on the right is where the frame slider goes. But Rob decided the factory bolt was too small and used this super beefy one. What this means though is the new beefy bolt won't fit in the hole, so you have to drill it out. As a disclaimer, I can't advise anyone to do this because you're basically modifying your bike irreversibly. Okay, maybe not this part because you could just buy a new bracket, but you also have to drill out this captive nut in the frame. So if you're not comfortable doing that, there's a German company that sells sliders that use the factory bolt. Alright, the installation is interesting. Put the bracket on first and line it up to make sure the new bolt fits, and then tighten down that tiny bolt on the left. In retrospect, I shouldn't have taken this bracket off at all and just drilled out the bracket and the frame hole at the same time, but no going back now. Now for the frame slider nut, it's important to orient it with the notch side in, so the bolt screws into it like this. That way it fits all the way into the frame hole and strengthens the connection. Definitely put the nut in before putting the fairing back on. Plug the turn signal back in, and then mount the frame slider shaft at the same time. It's too thick to fit through the hole, so you have to come from the outside. Try and squeeze your hand up in there somehow so you can hold the nut and then screw the bolt in. Now you can tighten down the rest of the fairing bolts and finish it off. While the frame slider bolt isn't too tight, rotate it so the holes are vertical. So when you put the cap on, the bolt can go in the bottom. This way rain doesn't fill up the hole and people can read the Energica of New England logos. Alright, the last part I ordered is possibly the coolest one. It's a seat knob to replace the key lock that opens the seat for charging. So instead of using your key, you just twist this knob. Every time you pull up to a charging station, you have to pull the key out, fumble around trying to get it in the lock, or if you have a keyless bike like Jen, you have to take the key out of your jacket to charge. And the whole process takes more time than I want to spend when I'm out on the road trying to plug in as fast as possible. So this part was originally designed by Chris Paz, and then Rob had it machined out of metal, so the final product is really good quality. To get access to the lock, you have to take off this charging port surround piece. It's just a whole bunch of 3mm Allen bolts. But if your bike has CCS2, it might also have this manual release lever, so getting this off takes some finesse. What's up? Next step, find all the Allen bolts that hold on the tailpiece, and unscrew them all. And then you can lift the tail and the seat right off. So right in here is the seat lock, and to get it out, okay, I unscrewed the piece at the ends and took the spring out, but you can just unhook the cable. That's a lot easier. And that way you don't risk dropping stuff under the charger and losing it forever. I just didn't know what I was doing at the time. I found it helps if you loosen up this side panel, because you have to get a huge wrench in there to unscrew this locking ring. Yeah, huge wrench. This is the only one I had, and I didn't want to go out and buy a proper one. Once the ring is loose, unscrew it, and the whole thing should just come out. The lock itself sits inside this cylindrical carrier thing, so to get it out, find something really pointy and strong. If you push down on this tab, it's kind of hard to see, but the lock should just slide right out. Yeah, this is the tab that needed to go down. Now you can put this lock in something else and use your Energica key for that. Your Energica key. Alright, next up, insert the knob. Put the spring on and that strangely shaped top piece. It's definitely way easier to do this stuff outside of the bike. What you don't see in this video is me trying to do it in the bike, and I don't suggest that. Okay, reinstallation goes like this. Line up the mounting bracket, screw on the ring, then hook up the cable and make sure it works. It works! As it turns out, it probably would have been easier to take the tail off before the charging port surround piece, but these are the things you learn when you take your bike apart without any idea of what you're doing. So it's a bit complicated, but look how cool that is. Coolest mod ever. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye! Just get comfortable.